The air in the new conference room still smelled faintly of paint and possibility. I stood there, watching Michael walk towards me. That same smile, the one that always looked a little too hungry, a little too sharp around the edges, was plastered on his face. It was the exact smile he'd worn right before he'd driven the knife into my back in my last life. He held out a hand, the other clutching a leather-bound proposal, the same damn proposal, the one that had been the first nail in my coffin, the one that promised everything and delivered only ruin. "Aaron, my friend," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Ready to talk about the future?" The weight of it all pressed down on me. The bankruptcy, the shame that clung to me like a second skin, the whispers and the stares. And then, the final, cold darkness of the bridge. But this wasn't then. This was now. I had lived this, died this, and somehow, inexplicably, I was back. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my own lips. "Michael," I said, my voice calm, level. "Thanks for coming in, but no, I don't think this is for us." His smile faltered, just for a second, confusion flickering in his eyes. That flicker was more satisfying than a feast. He tried to recover, to argue, but I just shook my head. As he finally turned and walked out, probably already dialing his other sharks, I pulled out my phone. One tap. A prearranged sequence initiated. A little counterpunch to his own venture, something he wouldn't see coming. I watched his retreating figure, a ghost from a past I was determined to rewrite. "The game begins again," I whispered to the empty room. "But this time, Michael, I know all your moves before you even make them." I woke up with a gasp. The sheets tangled around my legs. My small apartment, the one I'd rented when I first started Quantum Edge, felt both familiar and alien. It took a moment, like it did every morning, for my mind to catch up. I was 27 again. 5 years. I had 5 years before the bridge. The memories, sharp and cruel, were always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Quantum Edge, my baby, my revolutionary tech startup. We'd been on the verge of unicorn status, a billion-dollar valuation shimmering just within reach. And then they'd pulled the rug out from under me, my inner circle. The people I'd trusted most. My own sister, Elaine. I could still see her face, that carefully constructed mask of concern, even as she was slipping proprietary algorithms to our biggest competitor. All for a promised VP title. Family. What a joke. Professor Winters. My mentor. The man I'd looked up to. Almost a father figure. He'd been the one to stand before the press, his voice resonating with false authority, and declare my technology stolen. A fraud. He'd publicly disavowed me, the student he'd once championed, all to save his own skin and curry favor with the new powers that be. And Vanessa, my fiancée, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. When the investors moved in for the kill, when the takeover turned hostile, she'd sided with them, said it was just business. Later, I heard she married Michael. Of course she did. They deserved each other. The nightmares were the worst. The cold rain on my face, the slick steel of the railing under my hands, the long, terrifying fall into nothingness. I'd sweat through those, waking up with my heart hammering against my ribs, the phantom sensation of impact echoing through my bones. This morning, I forced myself out of bed, the ghost of the fall still clinging to me. Today was my first day back at the new Quantum Edge, the fledgling company that, in this timeline, was still just a handful of brilliant, naive engineers in a cramped office. Walking through those doors felt like stepping back into a dream, or maybe a nightmare I now had the chance to control. I saw them, my team, all younger, less jaded, their faces full of hope and excitement for the tech we were building. Tech that I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, would eventually be their undoing if I didn't change things. My eyes scanned the room, and then I saw her. Maya, tucked away in a corner, almost hidden behind a stack of monitors. She was brilliant, a truly gifted engineer, but in my previous life, she'd been overlooked, marginalized by the louder, more politically savvy members of the team. She'd left, frustrated and disillusioned, long before Quantum Edge hit its peak, long before the betrayals began. I remembered thinking, even then, what a loss that was. A new resolve hardened within me. This time it would be different. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I wouldn't trust the same smiling snakes. This time, I would build my company with the right people. People like Maya. I started a list in my head, a mental ledger of every single person who had driven a nail into my coffin. Elaine, Winters, Vanessa, and Michael, the orchestrator of it all. For each name, a plan began to form, a silent countermove, a way to turn their own greed and ambition against them. My goals were clear, laid out in my mind like lines of code. 1. Build a technology so undeniably superior, so revolutionary, that it couldn't be ignored or easily replicated. 2. Surround myself with a team of loyal, brilliant individuals, people who believed in the vision, not just the paycheck. And 3. Neutralize every threat, dismantle every plot before they could even take root. This wasn't just about revenge, though the thought of it was a satisfying warmth in my chest. This was about redemption, about proving that my vision, my technology, was worth fighting for. And this time, I was fighting with the ultimate weapon, foreknowledge. They thought they were playing chess. I was playing a game they didn't even know existed. The first step was already in motion. Michael's failed investment pitch. A small victory, but a satisfying one. It was a message, a subtle shift in the game. He wouldn't understand it yet, but he would. They all would. I spent the rest of the day observing, listening, watching the dynamics of this younger team, identifying the strengths, the weaknesses, the potential fault lines. Maya, I noticed, was already clashing quietly with some of the more arrogant senior engineers, her insightful suggestions dismissed or talked over. I made a mental note. Promote Maya. Give her the resources and the respect she deserved. She could be a powerful ally. The path ahead was treacherous. I was walking a tightrope, trying to alter the future without creating unforeseen paradoxes, without revealing the impossible truth of my return. Every decision, every interaction had to be calculated. But as I looked around at the small, bustling office, a flicker of something other than grim determination sparked within me. It was a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could not only survive this time, but actually build something lasting, something real, something that would change the world like I'd always dreamed. The villains were established, their roles in my downfall seared into my memory. Now it was time to start rewriting their scripts. It didn't take long. Just a few weeks into this new old life, I saw it. Elaine, my dear sister, huddled conspiratorially with 2 reps from Innovate Corp., our biggest competitor, at a little cafe down the street from our office. The same cafe. The same damn reps. Some things, it seemed, were depressingly predictable. My first instinct, the raw, remembered fury, was to storm over there, to call her out, to watch her face crumble. But the Aaron of this life, the one armed with hindsight, knew better. Confrontation was messy, unpredictable. No, there were cleaner, more effective ways. So I walked right past the cafe, gave a cheerful, oblivious wave when she glanced up, startled. Later that week, during one of our catch-up calls, I casually mentioned some of the exciting new developments we were working on. I even, with an air of feigned trust, shared some incomplete code documentation with her. Just some early ideas, sis. You know, bouncing things around. She'd lapped it up, of course, her voice practically vibrating with false sympathy and eager questions. What she didn't know was that every line of that incomplete code was subtly flawed, designed to create cascading errors if integrated into a larger system. And in the meantime, I was quietly filing patents, mountains of them, establishing irrefutable digital paper trails for every legitimate piece of Quantum Edge IP. Every timestamp, every email, every server log was a future nail in her coffin. The family dinner was next. Mom and Dad, bless their oblivious hearts, beaming with pride at their two entrepreneurial children. Elaine, playing the role of the supportive sister, brought it up, just as she had before. Aaron, I was talking to Michael the other day. You know, Michael Lee? He's with a really impressive investment group now. They're looking for promising tech startups. Maybe you should meet with them. Her eyes, when they met mine, were a little too bright, a little too innocent. Oh, I knew that look. That was the look of someone who thought they were being clever. I smiled, a serene, almost beatific expression. That's a great idea, Elaine. I'd be happy to meet with Michael. Send me his details. Inside, the pieces were clicking into place. My countermove was already in motion. The investment meeting was a masterclass in déjà vu. Michael, oozing that predatory charm, laid out the offer. The same terrible terms. The same clauses designed to strip me of control, to bleed the company dry, to set me up for the fall he'd orchestrated so perfectly last time. He talked about synergy, about market dominance, about how this was a partnership that would take Quantum Edge to the next level. I listened intently. I nodded thoughtfully. I asked probing questions, making him work for it, making him believe he had me on the hook. I saw Elaine, sitting in on the meeting at Michael's suggestion, practically preening. She thought this was her moment, the moment she secured her future, her precious VP title. We went through the motions. Lawyers were consulted. Documents were reviewed. The stage was set. Michael slid the signature pages across the polished mahogany table. Just sign here, Aaron, and we'll make history. I picked up the pen. I could feel their eyes on me, Michael's triumphant, Elaine's eager. I let the silence stretch, savoring the almost palpable tension in the room. Then, I put the pen down. Actually, Michael, I said, my voice calm, almost casual. I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I've already secured funding. The shift in the room was instantaneous. Michael's smile froze, then curdled. Elaine's jaw literally dropped. What? From who? Michael stammered, his composure finally cracking. A private equity firm, I said, naming a fictitious but plausible entity I'd conjured for just this occasion. Better terms, more aligned with our long-term vision. Before he could recover, before Elaine could process what was happening, my phone buzzed. Then Michael's phone. Then Elaine's. News alerts. The headline was brutal. Innovate Corp's quantum prototype suffers catastrophic failure during live demo. Suspected corporate espionage to blame. The story detailed how Innovate Corp, Michael's primary investment in the quantum space, had just spectacularly imploded during a major industry presentation. Their much-hyped prototype, built around newly acquired algorithms, had not just failed, it had practically melted down on stage. The algorithms, of course, were the ones I'd shared with Elaine, the ones that were designed to do exactly this. Michael's face went white. Elaine looked like she was going to be sick. It seems, I said, leaning back in my chair, enjoying the show, that some companies are having a bit of trouble with their R&D. Elaine's phone rang again. It was her boss at Innovate Corp, no doubt. She fumbled with it, her hands shaking. She didn't answer. Later that evening, she called me. Her voice was a wreck, a torrent of frantic sobs and panicked accusations. "Aaron, you have to help me. They're saying I stole the algorithms. They're talking about legal action. I'm going to lose my job. Aaron, please!" I listened patiently as she spun her tale of woe, of how she'd been misled, how it was all a misunderstanding. The same tired excuses she'd probably used in our previous life, though I hadn't been around to hear them then. When she finally wound down, her breath catching in ragged gasps, I took a slow sip of my coffee. The cheap, bitter brew from my modest apartment kitchen had never tasted so good. "Elaine," I said softly, my voice devoid of any emotion save a faint, chilling politeness. "I'm afraid I can't help you with that." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, then a choked sob. I hung up. One down. The first loop was closed. The taste of it wasn't exactly sweet, more like a bitter satisfaction, a necessary correction to the timeline. The game was indeed afoot, and I was just getting started. 6 months. That's how quickly things started to turn. Quantum Edge, no longer shackled by the prospect of Michael's predatory investment, was making waves. Our new quantum computing interface, the one I'd secretly been refining based on my foreknowledge, was a breakthrough. The industry was buzzing. We were the underdogs, the innovators, the ones to watch. And right on cue, Professor Winters appeared. He'd heard about our success, of course. He approached me after a small industry symposium, his face arranged in that familiar expression of benevolent wisdom. He offered mentorship, academic validation, access to his prestigious university lab. "Aaron, my boy," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder, "I always knew you had it in you. Let me help you navigate these treacherous waters." I remembered. Oh, I remembered. I remembered how he'd claimed co-authorship on my early papers, subtly positioning himself as the guiding force behind my discoveries. I remembered how, when the crisis hit in my past life, when Michael and his cronies were tearing Quantum Edge apart, Winters had been the first to jump ship, the first to publicly denounce my work as derivative and potentially stolen. He'd saved his own reputation by sacrificing mine. My first instinct was to tell him exactly where he could shove his mentorship. But again, the wiser, reborn Aaron held back. Outright rejection would be too suspicious, too out of character for the eager young protege he remembered. "Professor," I said, my voice filled with carefully feigned gratitude, "I would be honored. Your guidance would be invaluable." So I accepted his help. I attended his lab meetings. I listened to his advice, and I documented everything. Every email, every conversation, every suggestion he made. Especially the suggestions that subtly steered my research towards dead ends, towards avenues that would benefit his existing work more than mine. He thought he was playing me, guiding me towards research that he could later claim, or at least heavily influence. What he didn't know was that I was playing him. I intentionally fed him a flawed research path, a complex but ultimately fruitless line of inquiry that looked incredibly promising on the surface. It was based on a theoretical offshoot of my real work, something plausible enough to be convincing, but fundamentally flawed in a way only I, with my future knowledge, could fully understand. Meanwhile, in secret, late at night in my own lab, with a small, carefully vetted team that included Maya, I pursued the real innovation, the true breakthrough. It was Maya who eventually figured it out. She was too smart, too perceptive. She'd noticed the discrepancies, the deliberate misdirections in the work I was sharing with Winters versus the actual progress we were making. One evening, she cornered me in the lab, her expression a mixture of confusion and accusation. "Aaron," she said, her voice low but firm, "what's going on?" The research you're showing Professor Winters, it's not our best work. It's almost like you want him to go down the wrong path." It was a risk, a huge one. But looking into her intelligent, questioning eyes, I knew I needed allies. True allies, not sycophants or fair-weather friends. "So," I told her, "not everything. Not the full, insane truth about rebirth and suicide, but enough." I told her about the betrayals, about how certain people had tried to destroy me and steal my work in the past. I told her that I was taking steps to protect Quantum Edge this time, to ensure that our innovations wouldn't be co-opted or sabotaged. She listened, her brow furrowed in concentration. It was a wild story, and I saw the skepticism warring with a dawning understanding in her eyes. But she'd also seen enough of the cutthroat nature of the tech world, the academic backstabbing, to know that my paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. "So, Winters," she began, her voice cautious. "Winters is walking into a trap of his own making," I finished, "one that I'm merely facilitating." A slow smile spread across her face. "All right, Aaron," she said. "I'm in. Show me the real research." From that moment, Maya became more than just a talented engineer. She became my confidant, my strategist, my first true ally in this new life. A few months later, right on schedule, Professor Winters announced his groundbreaking new research paper. He was presenting it at the upcoming International Tech Conference, the biggest event of the year. His paper, of course, was based entirely on the flawed methodology I'd so generously shared with him. He'd even managed to discover a few novel, and equally flawed, applications for it. The conference was a media circus. Winters, basking in the preemptive glow of his imminent triumph, presented first. He was bombastic, confident, making bold claims about how his breakthrough would revolutionize the field. He spoke of years of dedicated research, of the lonely pursuit of knowledge. He even, with a magnanimous nod in my direction, I was sitting in the front row naturally, mentioned the promising young minds he was currently mentoring. Then it was my turn. I walked onto the stage, a stark contrast to Winters' academic bluster. I was calm, direct. I started by acknowledging the professor's work, his dedication. Then, with a series underscore of clear, concise slides, I presented Quantum Edge's latest findings, the complete, correct solution, the real breakthrough, a solution so elegant, so demonstrably superior, that it didn't just build upon Winters' flawed research, it rendered it entirely obsolete. Instantly. You could feel the shift in the auditorium. The polite applause for Winters turned into stunned silence. Then a rising murmur of excitement as the implications of my presentation sank in. On the giant screens flanking the stage, real-time social media feeds exploded. Hashtags like #WintersDebunked, #QuantumLeap, and #AaronChenGenius started trending worldwide. Professor Winters' face, projected onto those same screens, was a mask of disbelief, then dawning horror, then pure, unadulterated fury. His academic reputation, so carefully cultivated over decades, was crumbling. Live on stage, in front of the entire global tech community. Later that evening, I found him at the hotel bar. He looked diminished. Smaller. He approached my table, his earlier confidence completely gone. He offered to publicly apologize. He offered to retract his paper. He even desperately offered to collaborate, to merge his lab with Quantum Edge, to lend his, now somewhat tarnished name to our future endeavors. Anything to salvage his career. I smiled, a genuinely amused smile this time. I slid a glass of whiskey across the table towards him. He looked at it, then at me, his eyes pleading. "Professor," I said, my voice soft, almost gentle. "Don't worry about it. After all," I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I learned everything I know from watching you." He stared at me, the meaning dawning in his eyes. He'd taught me about ambition, about self-preservation, about the ruthlessness required to succeed in this world. He just never imagined I'd be the one to use those lessons against him. He didn't take the whiskey. He just turned and walked away, a broken man. 2 down. The board was getting clearer, and Quantum Edge was just getting started. A year. It had been 1 year since I'd woken up in that cramped apartment, 27 again, with the ghosts of my past life clinging to me. Now, things were different. Quantum Edge wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Our valuation had hit $500 million. We were the darlings of the tech world, the innovators everyone was watching. And just like clockwork, another ghost from my past decided to materialize. Vanessa. She reappeared at an industry networking event, looking stunning as always. She'd left Michael, she told me, her voice a carefully modulated blend of regret and newfound strength. His ambition, it became too much, she confided, her eyes searching mine for a sign, any sign. I always believed in your vision, Aaron. You know that, right? I did know that. I knew she'd believed in it right up until the moment it became more profitable to believe in Michael's. She started hinting at things. Inside information. Michael, apparently, was regrouping. He was putting together a new investment strategy, one specifically designed to target Quantum Edge, to exploit our perceived weaknesses, to cut us off at the knees before we became too powerful. She could help me, she suggested, her hand lightly touching my arm. She could give me the intel I needed to stay one step ahead. I played along. I appeared receptive to her tentative romantic overtures, to her whispers of corporate intrigue. We had dinners, late-night calls. I let her believe she was winning me back, that her loyalty was being rewarded. She fed me snippets of information about Michael's plans, little breadcrumbs she thought were leading me into her confidence. What she didn't know was that Maya, now my official deputy, my trusted right hand, was my real confidant. Every piece of intelligence Vanessa gave me, we analyzed, dissected, and cross-referenced. Most of it was vague, designed to make me nervous, to push me into making rash decisions. But some of it, the parts that aligned with Michael's known patterns of aggression, we took seriously. Vanessa told me Michael was convinced our next big move was European expansion. He was, she whispered, preparing a massive financial blockade, leveraging his company to the hilt to secure exclusive partnerships and regulatory roadblocks that would stop us cold. "Thank you, Vanessa," I'd said, my voice full of false gratitude. "This is invaluable." And so, Quantum Edge made a very public show of preparing for a major European push. We hired consultants specializing in EU markets. We sent delegations to Brussels and Berlin. We even leaked internal memos detailing our ambitious and entirely fictitious European strategy. Michael, just as Vanessa had predicted, took the bait. He poured massive resources into his European counter-gambit, over-leveraging his company, stretching his finances to the breaking point, all to block a move we never intended to make. Because while Michael was busy building his European fortress, Maya and I were quietly, methodically executing our real plan, a massive expansion into the Asian markets. We secured the partnerships, navigated the regulations, and laid the groundwork for a dominant presence in a region Michael had foolishly assumed was already locked down by his existing, complacent allies. The deception was revealed, fittingly, at a company gala celebrating Quantum Edge's 1-year anniversary and our new, eye-watering valuation. Vanessa was there, of course, on my arm, playing the role of the supportive, rediscovered love. She looked radiant, confident, believing she was on the cusp of having it all. Me, my success, and the satisfaction of having helped me get there. Then came my keynote speech. I talked about innovation, about perseverance, and then I announced our surprise, game-changing move, the launch of Quantum Edge Asia, complete with signed, sealed, and delivered partnerships with some of the biggest tech players in the region. The room erupted. I saw Vanessa's face. The radiant smile faltered, then vanished, replaced by a look of dawning, horrified comprehension. She'd been played, used, manipulated just as expertly as she had once manipulated me. The news of our Asian expansion, coupled with the sudden, catastrophic failure of Michael's over-leveraged European blockade, sent his company's stocks into a nosedive. The financial press had a field day. Michael, the master strategist, had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and left holding a very expensive, very empty bag. Later that night, after the gala, Vanessa confronted me in my office. The confident facade was gone. Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't angry, not anymore. Just broken. "Why, Aaron?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "After everything, I thought—" "You thought what, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice quiet, devoid of the triumph I'd felt just hours before. Looking at her now, I didn't feel anger or even satisfaction, just a kind of weary sadness. "I thought you still cared," she said, her voice barely audible. "Leaving Michael? Siding with the investors back then? It was the biggest mistake of my life. I regretted it every single day." I listened, my expression unreadable. Then, I walked over to my desk, opened a drawer, and took out a single photograph. It was us from our previous life, laughing, happy, on the day that was supposed to have been our wedding day. A lifetime ago. I held it for a moment, looking at the hopeful faces of two people who no longer existed. Then, without breaking eye contact with Vanessa, I placed the photograph face down into the shredder. The machine whirred, tearing our past into 1,000 tiny pieces. "Some mistakes, Vanessa," I said, my voice soft but final. "Can't be undone." She stared at the shredder, then at me, her eyes wide with a pain that was all too familiar. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of my office, out of my life, for good this time. 3 down. The board was almost clear, but the game, I knew, was far from over. The most dangerous point was yet to come. Quantum Edge was hurtling towards unicorn status again. That billion-dollar valuation, the same precipice where everything had shattered in my past life, was looming. And with it came the fear. Despite all my victories, all my carefully orchestrated countermoves, an insidious dread began to creep into my waking hours. The flashbacks became more frequent, more vivid. I'd be in a board meeting, discussing market projections, and suddenly I'd be back on that bridge, the cold rain on my skin, the roar of the water below. Panic attacks would grip me, leaving me breathless and trembling in the sterile confines of my office. History, it seemed, had a gravitational pull, and I was terrified that despite everything, I was still caught in its orbit. One afternoon it happened. The pressure, the constant vigilance, the weight of my secret, it all became too much. Maya found me collapsed on my office floor, hyperventilating, incoherent, lost in a waking nightmare. She didn't panic. Maya never panicked. She got me out of the building, away from prying eyes, and to a private hospital she somehow knew about. I was sedated. And in that hazy, drug-induced state, the carefully constructed walls around my secret crumbled. I mumbled, I talked, about the bridge, about Michael, about Elaine and Winters, about living it all before. Details that made no sense, that couldn't possibly be true. But Maya, ever the pragmatist, ever the scientist, recorded it all. When I woke up, groggy and disoriented, Maya was there. Her expression was unreadable, a complex mix of concern and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. She'd been busy. She'd taken my incoherent ramblings, my impossible pronouncements, and she'd started digging, cross-referencing dates, events, details that I couldn't possibly have known through normal means. She'd connected dots that shouldn't have been connectable. In a secure, soundproof room at the hospital, a room she'd somehow arranged, she laid it all out. The recordings, her notes, the undeniable evidence that my foreknowledge was real. There was no point in denying it anymore. The charade was over. So, I told her, everything. The success, the betrayals, the bankruptcy, the public humiliation, the cold, lonely walk to the bridge, the fall. And then the impossible, inexplicable return. Waking up 27 again, with all the bitter knowledge of a life already lived, already lost. She listened, her face pale, her eyes never leaving mine. She didn't interrupt. She didn't call me crazy. When I finally finished, the silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then Maya did something I never expected. She revealed her own secret. "Aaron," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "My full name is Maya Wei Jiang." The name meant nothing to me. "My grandfather," she continued, "was Wei Jiang, the founder of Jiang Enterprises." Jiang Enterprises. The name hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just a tech company. They were a global behemoth, one of the most powerful, most secretive, and most influential tech dynasties in Asia. Their reach was legendary. "My family," Maya said, "has historical records, detailed chronicles of the tech industry going back generations. In those records, Quantum Edge was significant. Your technology, Aaron, was described as a pivotal moment in computing history, a revolution that was tragically cut short." She paused, letting the words sink in. "According to our records, after your mysterious death, your technology was stolen, broken up, and sold off to various competitors. The full potential was never realized. But the core concepts, the foundational algorithms, they were game-changing." I stared at her, speechless. "My family," she continued, "has always believed that if Quantum Edge had survived, if your vision had been allowed to mature, the world of technology would look very different today. So, when I saw your initial papers, the ones you published before everything fell apart in your first life, I recognized the echoes of that lost potential. I joined your company, this tiny, unknown startup, because I wanted to see if you could do it again. If you could recreate that spark." She took a deep breath. "The Jiang family, through a series of shell corporations and discrete investments, has been quietly supporting Quantum Edge from the very beginning of this timeline. We've been watching, waiting for you to prove that you were who we thought you were, that your vision was real." The room tilted. The implications were staggering. All this time, I'd thought I was fighting alone, a solitary soldier waging a secret war. But I hadn't been. I'd had an invisible army at my back, an ally more powerful than I could have ever imagined, an ally who believed in me, not just in this life, but across generations. "Your rebirth," Maya said, the word still sounding strange, alien, confirmed what my family had long suspected, that your work was too important to be lost, that you deserved a second chance. Together, in that secure room, we formulated a plan, a new protocol. Maya called it Protocol Phoenix. A complete restructuring of Quantum Edge, designed to cut out, once and for all, every remaining potential threat, every lingering loyalty to the old guard, every possible avenue for betrayal. With the full backing of Jiang Enterprises, we had the power to remake the company in our own image, an impenetrable fortress built on loyalty, innovation, and an unshakable shared vision. The final act played out with brutal efficiency. A hastily convened emergency board meeting. Michael, who still held a small, troublesome block of shares from a pre-Rebirth seed round. Elaine, who, despite her earlier disgrace, had managed to cling to a minor consultancy role through family connections. Professor Winters, who had been subtly trying to worm his way back into relevance by offering strategic academic partnerships. They all sat there, around the polished mahogany table, probably expecting another tedious discussion about quarterly earnings. Then Maya walked in. Flanked by a team of lawyers I didn't recognize, lawyers who exuded an aura of quiet, unshakable power. "Good morning, gentlemen, Elaine," Maya said, her voice calm, authoritative. "As of 0900 hours this morning, Zhang Enterprises has acquired a controlling interest in Quantum Edge. There will be some restructuring." Simultaneously, as Maya spoke, Michael, Elaine, and Winters received notifications on their phones. Their company access emails, servers, keycards, all revoked, terminated, effective immediately. Security guards, discreet but firm, materialized by their chairs. "If you'll come with us, please." The shock on their faces was a picture. The confusion. The dawning, impotent rage. They were escorted out, unceremoniously, from the company they had once plotted to control. To destroy. As they stood in the parking lot, probably still trying to process what had just happened, their phones buzzed again. This time it was a news alert, breaking across all major financial networks. Quantum Edge announces strategic partnership with Zhang Enterprises. New valuation, $15 billion. 15 billion. Not just a unicorn, a decacorn, a new legend in the tech world. From the window of the conference room, Maya and I watched them. 3 small, irrelevant figures in a vast parking lot, staring up at the gleaming tower of a company that was no longer, and would never again be, within their reach. The game had changed, irrevocably. 6 months later, the dust had settled. Quantum Edge, now supercharged by the resources and reach of Zhang Enterprises, was the undisputed king of the tech world. Our growth was explosive, our innovations relentless. We weren't just leading the market, we were the market. I sat in my new office. It was minimalist, stark, overlooking the sprawling city skyline from the top floor of the new Quantum Edge global headquarters. On my desk, a single sheet of paper. A list of names. The ones who had tried to destroy me. Most of them were now footnotes in a story of failure and obsolescence. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, Michael Lee is still in the lobby. He's been here for 6 hours. He's insistent." I glanced at the clock. 6 hours. Let him wait. 2 more, I said. Then send him up. When Michael finally shuffled into my office, he was a shadow of his former self. His expensive suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his usual predatory arrogance replaced by a raw, desperate hunger. He clutched a battered briefcase, a pathetic proposal to save his now failing company, a company he had leveraged into oblivion trying to outmaneuver me. He didn't even try to feign confidence. He just started talking, a torrent of excuses, justifications, and finally, admissions. He confessed to everything, orchestrating my downfall in the previous timeline. The depth of his betrayals, the calculated cruelty of his machinations, it was even worse than I had known. He'd systematically poisoned every relationship, every opportunity, ensuring that when I fell completely. I listened, my expression unchanging as he laid bare the full extent of his villainy. And then he begged for a lifeline, for an investment, for a second chance. Begged me, the man whose life he had destroyed, to save him. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Chen, Professor Winters is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." Before I could respond, Winters himself pushed past my assistant and burst into the office, his face a mask of desperate hope. He'd heard about Michael's pilgrimage, apparently. He launched into his own pitch, offering his, now thoroughly discredited, lab facilities, his academic credentials, anything, if Quantum Edge would just throw him a lifeline, a chance to salvage his shattered career. As Winters was babbling, my speakerphone, which my assistant had frantically activated, sprang to life. It was Elaine. Her voice was choked with tears. Aaron, are you there? It's Mom and Dad. They lost everything, Aaron. Their retirement savings. They invested it all with Michael. It's all gone." The trifecta of despair, each one in their own way appealing to a sense of pity, of shared history, of family that they themselves had shredded. And then a final pathetic coda. A text message pinged on my phone. It was from Vanessa, a picture of a wedding invitation, her wedding, presumably, but Michael's name was crudely crossed out. Scrawled across the expensive cardstock, in what looked like eyeliner, was a single word. "Sorry," followed by 3 question marks. I stood up, slowly, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city spread out beneath me, a glittering panorama of lights and ambition, the same city where, a lifetime ago, I had stood on a different precipice, a bridge railing, and made a very different kind of leap. I looked out at that view for a long moment, the ghosts of the past swirling around me, their desperate pleas echoing in the silent, opulent office. Then, I turned back to face Michael, to face Winters, to face the disembodied, sobbing voice of my sister. My voice, when I finally spoke, was perfectly calm, devoid of anger, of triumph, of anything at all. Just a quiet, final statement of fact. No. Security, already alerted by Maya, who had been monitoring the situation, materialized discreetly. They escorted Michael and Winters out, their protests, their renewed begging, fading down the hallway. I didn't watch them go. My focus was already elsewhere. On the future. A future that was finally, truly mine to build. Free of the shadows, free of the betrayals, free of the crushing weight of a past that no longer defined me. The game wasn't just won. It was over. 5 years. The sunsets in the Maldives really were as spectacular as the brochures claimed. I stood on the private beach of our secluded villa, the warm sand between my toes, watching the sky bleed into a symphony of orange, pink, and gold. Maya came up beside me, slipping her hand into mine. Wife, partner, equal. The lines had blurred beautifully over the years. Our tech empire, an evolution of Quantum Edge, had grown beyond even my wildest reborn dreams. But it was the life we'd built together that felt like the real achievement. "The Foundation Board just approved the latest round of funding," she said, her voice soft, content. We were discussing the Quantum Edge Foundation, our philanthropic arm. Its mission was simple: to find and fund the brilliant, overlooked, and underestimated entrepreneurs, the ones who didn't fit the traditional investor mold, the ones who, like me, had a vision that others couldn't or wouldn't see. Good, I said. Revenge, I'd come to realize, had been a powerful fuel. It had given me focus, a burning purpose in those early days of my second chance. But it was a finite resource. Building something meaningful, something that helped others, something that lasted, that's where I'd found a different kind of energy. A quieter, more sustainable peace. A notification chimed on Maya's tablet. She glanced at it. Then a small, knowing smile touched her lips. Well, this is interesting. What is it? I asked. An application For the Foundation's mentorship program. From an Elaine Chen. She looked at me, her eyes searching, a hint of amusement in their depths. A surprisingly promising new venture, actually. Some kind of AI-driven sustainable agriculture platform. Elaine, my sister. After the fallout from Michael's collapse, after losing our parents' money, she'd disappeared from my life. I hadn't heard anything from her or about her in years. Now here she was, a digital ghost, reappearing in the most unexpected of ways. Poetic, isn't it? Maya said softly. The closure it would bring, if you accepted her? I looked out at the horizon, at the endless expanse of ocean meeting sky. The old anger, the bitter taste of betrayal. It was still there, a faint scar on my soul. But it no longer burned. It no longer consumed me. A genuine smile. The first truly unburdened smile I think I'd managed in 2 lifetimes, spread across my face. I'll review it personally, I said. We walked along the shoreline, the gentle waves lapping at our feet, discussing our next big project. A new technology, still in its nascent stages, but one we were both incredibly passionate about. Something designed to help people recognize the subtle patterns of manipulation, of deception, in their personal and professional lives. A shield against the kind of betrayals that had once defined me. I stopped for a moment, watching the waves, the endless rhythm of them, coming and going. There was no fear anymore. No haunting memories of falling, of cold water, of darkness. The past was just that, past. The water below was just water. My gaze finally was fixed firmly on the horizon ahead, on the infinite possibilities of a future I had not just reclaimed, but actively, joyfully created.